Hi, everyone. And again, to anyone who just joined us, thanks for joining our final session of day one of our National Small Nonprofit Summit, which is a panel focused on supporting nonprofit staff. So we started out today talking about how important people are to our ability to create impact. We spent time throughout the day diving deeper into understanding of the people of in our sphere, whether that was donors or community members or our staff. And then we heard from Matt right after lunch about the current state of how people are feeling in the region. So we wanted to bookend this day by ending on a session really highlighting the experience of 4 nonprofit leaders who will speak to how they've worked and continue to work to create a supportive culture and organization for their staff that really encourages both staff growth and accountability. So our featured panelists today will be Maryam from Live It, Learn It, Nicole from LAYC Career Academy, Keesha from Teaching for Change, and Madeline from District Bridges. Welcome. All right, perfect. We are all spotlighted. If you all on your screen can see them, that is great. That's how it should be. They are kind of 4 corners here on screen. Panelists, I will call on you one by one just for some intros. And then as we go on, feel free to answer questions, though I know we have a lot to get through. And as folks who are participating in today's panel, as attendees, if you have questions for our panelists throughout the panel, feel free to go ahead and put those in the chat, and I'll make sure that we have some time to get some audience Q&A. But for our panelists, the first thing I'll just ask is if you can share your name, your role, and just a quick overview of your organization. Keesha, you're first on my screen if I can call on you first.
Of course, I'm always like, let me not be the first one, and then there we go. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Keesha Ceran. I'm the Deputy Director of Teaching for Change. We are a pre-K through 12 education nonprofit located here in Washington, D.C. We do place-based work here in the D.C. metro area, but we also do national work as well around professional development, community building, lesson development and support for teachers, parents, and other community as well. I joined Teaching for Change in January of 2021, never really being in the nonprofit space. So this space and this summit is how I'm continuing to learn about the work, but I'm excited to see familiar faces in the chat or on screen and in the chat. So I think one of the questions that to just lean into a little bit is just what is our culture at Teaching for Change, and how do we connect in that way? And I think like many, everyone who's drawn to the nonprofit space or most nonprofit space have a passion for the work and have a passion for the output of the results. So I'd say our organization is very detail oriented, passionate about education, passionate about education justice, and leaning into how they serve in that capacity. And with that, I think also means that we are high achieving and sometimes overachieving in many different ways. And when we talk about how that shows up in staff engagement, I know a lot of the theme of today's sessions that I've been in has also been about burnout and like other ways that we support well-being. Those are real factors that play into the type of humans that are attracted to the work that we do, and then the type of culture that we desire to keep an eye on and continue to cultivate so we're all thriving.
Thanks, Keesha. Welcome. Next here, I have Nicole.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Nicole Hanrahan. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the LAYC Career Academy. LAYC Career Academy is an adult public charter school in Washington, D.C. You can think of us as kind of like a hybrid between a community college and a high school. So our students are ages 16 to 30, and they come for a variety of reasons. Some come to work towards getting a high school credential. Some are working on literacy and numeracy. Some are here to learn English. And in order to graduate, students need to either become a medical assistant or become an A+ certified help desk technician, or go on to college. As for our sort of staff culture, I think that we think of ourselves in some ways a lot like a family. I think that a lot of our students come to our school because they're looking for a more personalized experience, something that's more individualized towards them, where they get a lot of the support. We find that most of our students The academics are not the problem. There's other things that may be getting in the way of their success, and we have a staff who's there to support them. And I think that's reflective of our culture. We're very family-like. We look out for each other. We work hard, but there's a lot of heart in there as well.
Thank you so much. Next here I have Maryam.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maryam Trowell, and I am one of the co-executive directors at Live It, Learn It, as well as the head of programming and curriculum. So I have two roles here at this organization. And Live It, Learn It creates and delivers experiential learning opportunities to 3rd through 5th grade DCPS students. So we work with all the museums here in DC in some capacity, with teachers to make sure that students are getting the opportunity to learn both inside and outside the classroom. And then in terms of our staff culture, I would like, if you were to ask any of our staff members who really honestly I feel like should be in this spot better than me, right? They would say that transparency is like my biggest tagline. I think our biggest tagline as an organization. We are a very small staff. I was just onboarding 3 part-time educators for a pilot, and I was like, to be transparent, you all, I just got here 5 minutes ago. So I think transparency is just humongous for who we are as an organization and the way in which that we operate. And then I would also just say we're collaborative. I'm two roles in this organization. So that right there necessitates collaborativeness or collaboration, and as is my other co-executive director. And so we are, taking this organization to the next step together. We are no more than the people that are right next to us. And so we are constantly pushing, like, how can we dive in? How can we be a part of the successes, the failures, the trials, the challenges as an organization?
Thank you. Last but not least here, I have Madeline.
Hi, everybody. I'm Madeleine Odendahl. I'm the Deputy Director at District Bridges. We are a community ecosystem development organization. We work in 9 neighborhoods across wards 1 through 4. And our approach is a little bit different in that we start from a place of collaboration and capacity building, looking to strengthen the whole ecosystem and the whole neighborhood in which we work. So we do small business technical assistance, connective services, community engagement, events, place management. I'm sure I forgot something. So I joined District Bridges in December of 2019. I was the 4th staff member. And this year we will hire our 23rd role. So rapid growth. And as the deputy director, I'm responsible for operational sustainability and programmatic growth, which is a fancy way of saying that my job is really about helping our team be as effective and efficient as possible. So our culture is very informed by our organizational values. We say a lot that we take our work very seriously, but take ourselves not very seriously. And we've seen that this creates an environment where people feel supported and encouraged to work hard, but not at the expense of their own well-being. And we're very explicit as an organization that we are divesting from white supremacy and the symptoms of perfectionism, productivity as a person's value, or individualism. And this is really reinforced in our performance management process as well. I hate the phrase work-life balance. I hate it. I think I'll just say that now. I'm a person who hates that phrase. It's just balance. It is my life. I want my work to be meaningful. It should help me create a life that I want. And so we talk about that with our team a lot. We're very open about the fact that we know people won't stay here forever, but while they are here, we want them to be their best selves in a way that supports them and the organization. And I also agree with Maryam that they should be here, not me. But I'm going to talk on their behalf for a little bit.
Well, thanks all for sharing a little bit more about your organizations and the culture. I think that really helps kind of frame today's conversation and where we're coming in as small organizations and leaders of those organizations. I'd like to start off with some questions around staff support, and then we'll kind of get into staff growth, knowing that support can also look and really is those growth opportunities as well. But we'd be curious to hear, what informal ways are your organizations prioritizing staff well-being? From staff-led programming, resources, whatever that might be in that more informal sense.
All right, I can kick us off. Oh, did you want to go, Madeline? Okay, either way is fine. I think from an informal perspective, we do another things. I know one of the panelists has already mentioned transparency, and I think that this is important. I think it was Brene Brown who said clarity is kind. And so I think one of the ways we manage staff well-being is we just try to be as clear as possible with folks. And so everyone knows what to expect. And this shows up in a variety of different ways. I send out our financials to everyone every single month. So if there's no question about what we can afford or what we can't afford, because everybody knows what the budget looks like. And that is very helpful. Then I think that then, as much as we can set clear expectations about what work looks like, we do that whenever possible. I mean, for example, in a school, the month of September is horrible every time. It's just the way it is. So when we have newer staff, I'm just very upfront with them. August, September, and October are just going to be hard. And that's just the way it is. And, and then if you still feel like you're, dying in, March or February, let's come and talk about it. But, so I think sometimes it's sort of setting some clear expectations about, what's available and when things are hard is important. Then I think there's some things that we do that are important in terms of professional development. First of all, we give every staff member a stipend every year to spend on their own professional development, and we purposefully leave it rather open-ended. If you can sort of justify in any way that this is related to your job, we're going to let you do it. It's your money to spend, because we do believe that people know what's going to help them grow the most. And then I think one thing that we do that's informal, important, and this is something that we can all do, and it's kind of one of our greatest powers as small nonprofits. There's nobody here who doesn't know the names of all of their employees. That's one of the things when you have an organization that's less than $4.5 million, you're going to know everyone's name, right? So there's an ability to develop some relationships and for people to feel heard, right? And I think that there's opportunities to use that really well. And one of the things that I always do is I ask people, what their path is, what they want to do. And I think one of the panelists also mentioned before that there wasn't an expectation that people would spend forever in the organization. So, when we have that conversation with people, we say, what do you want to do here? But it can be somewhere else too. And how can we help you do that? And tie that into there. So people feel supported, not just as cogs in our wheel, but as a whole person who has career goals that are aligned to organization, but also may involve something else later down the line, and that's all right. So I guess I'd say we focus a lot on sort of growth and professional development, and transparency and clarity whenever possible to create an environment where people feel comfortable.
Absolutely, thank you.
I'll jump in and echo transparency. I think clear measurables and deliverables are one of the easiest ways to support your team, and often one of the first things to go in a small organization, because there's an attitude of all hands on deck and other duties as assigned and job descriptions. And I think that it is one of the easiest things to do for your team, particularly for people coming in, is being very clear about what is expected of them, and providing opportunities for feedback along the way. But we set up our entire year with strategic goals for the organization. And then each staff person has a series of what we call rocks. That's their quarterly goals that they're trying to achieve. You can only have 4 to 7. Your manager creates them with you. They are co-created. So the staff person has ownership in them. And that is what success looks like for you this quarter. And if those things are being met, if you are meeting those deliverables, then we're good to go. I think a couple of like small things that we do that now I will expect in any job moving forward, but we have had new people be like, oh, wow, that's so nice, is a culture of not responding outside of working hours. We are really stringent about that, and that there's not an expectation that you will. Another one is that we talk openly about growth, both personally and professionally. A lot of us are in therapy. A lot of us need rest and vacations, and we talk about that at all levels of the organization. And one of my favorite like little things we've done to kind of systemize well-being is we use a platform called Rippling for our HR benefits and staff management. And I created a workflow in Rippling that when an employee hasn't taken time off in 2 months, it sends them a note and their supervisor that says, hi, you haven't taken a day off. Would you like to take some time just for yourself? And it's the little things that I think help our team know that when we say we prioritize staff well-being, we mean it, and we've systemized it that way.
Absolutely. And then I'll also kind of add to this, if anyone else wants to add here, either build upon what you've already shared or share, if you haven't, what are some formal ways that you're prioritizing staff well-being? So whether that's maybe benefits, I know some of them have already been mentioned, benefits, specific times off, any other ways that you're formalizing staff well-being?
Yeah, so at Lilly, we have unlimited PTO. And I know that is something that is like scary for a lot of nonprofits, organizations, but it really just was what fit our organization. We run along with DCPS's schedule. So having built in like they're on spring break, you're on spring break. They're on winter break, you're on winter break, or every single opportunity that teachers or that our educators can have to take off. They know their schedule, they know their workload better than I know their workload. So why do I need to regulate how frequently and often they're working when they know when the best time for them to take off would be? We also do, yes, paid healthcare, dental, vision, because if you can't show up healthy, then you can't show up at all, right? Those things are important. And I mean, like, let's, be real. We're a nonprofit, so we're not paying, everyone what they probably could get on in private. So as an organization, we should be taking care of them health-wise, benefit-wise.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'm seeing here too in the chat, thanks for sharing, Madeline, a little bit more about what you all do. I'd be curious,
Yeah,
you all...
I was just going to add, one of the things we've started doing is in our offer letters, providing the approximate cost of these benefits, because we found that that's really helped people who maybe are making a shift from the private sector and or want a bigger number in that offer letter to say, like, we understand we're a small nonprofit. We're not going to be offering you as much as you can make somewhere else. But this does have a financial cost. And I feel like a lot of times employees don't understand that that costs money. Like even running an org-sponsored 401k plan costs the organization money. I pay a membership fee for us to access that. And so helping the team understand, then when we go back to them and say, what other benefits do you want? They are giving informed decisions. And anyway, I wanted to mention that as well. That's been really helpful for us.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Kind of curious to hear about what your staff support, quote unquote, journey has been like, knowing that you all have shared some really awesome things that you offer your staff and ways that you're thinking about staff well-being. Also understanding that may have not been the case from the very get-go of the organization. Would love to hear, is there anything you're doing now that you didn't previously do? Anything you no longer offer that you previously did? Kind of how have you created and prioritized staff well-being and involved really staff in those decisions around your culture rest benefits?
I'll just jump in where it's funny, I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh, I'm just learning more than I'm like giving in the process. But that's why we do this, right? I'll just say, like, I think, like many of us, a lot of what we're trying to do is like build the track as we are driving the train, right? And so I'll just speak to where we are at Teaching for Change. Like, we're in this process. I think that I love what Nicole and Madeleine were sharing just about like that it's part of the language and part of the culture and the onboarding and other pieces. And so one thing I'm taking away is like, name it and be good with like naming it, even if our team might not be there in the headspace to think about that, but like how valuable that is to name the direction we're going. And I'm being mindful because I do have some staff on the call, and recognizing that there are some things that we're dreaming into. But I think like many of us know, right? Like we, in being in one of the previous sessions about the trends that are happening in the nonprofit space, and especially when we talk about burnout, like I think the reality is many of us know why it's important because we're feeling it ourselves, right? And so one thing, like coming into the organization, I know we all probably do staff surveys, we do board surveys, and are really thinking about what are the data points and what are our staff saying, but then what are they saying in either the overabundance of flex time or the never taking vacation as it is, or whatever those pieces are, and what are the ways that we can cue certain elements. And so I think I may be answering one of the last questions, but even just reminding staff of the time that they have, like we don't yet have an unlimited PTO, and that's just where we are as an organization. But I do also see that even with the time that staff do have, they may not always be taking it. And so one thing that I try to get in rhythm is every quarter reminding staff that, hey, like staff balances come to this, we have a rollover, and this is what that hour amount is. Here's your surplus, take time, right? And in the last year and a half that we've been having those frequent communications, like I have a staff member who has now been, they said to me for the first time that they've not had they've not left any hours on the table, that they've been able to roll over the amount that like we require, right? And that's awesome. And because they've been working there for a period of time that they weren't doing that. And so I think it's being able to encourage those pieces. And even in all staff meetings, we've had times where we set time to ask, like, what's a well-being practice that you've adopted? I'm in the office most of the time, and one of the well-being practices I've adopted is my Fitbit, and looking at the benefits that our healthcare providers have. So I'll just plug, if you are with Care First, because that's what I know, there are great benefits with Care First that we might not always be thinking about, that can also add to the support of what we're trying to build. So Care First has a well-being program. They offer you a Fitbit, they offer you a digital scale, you have health coaching and other pieces that are part of the program, and all you have to do is be a member. And so I think it's those pieces of reminding our team, like, hey, these are these benefits that we have. Even thinking about just 401k, like when I got there, we didn't have anybody adopting into the plan, or it's a 403b, sorry. We didn't have anybody adopting into the plan, but working with our broker and doing just a couple of sessions where like, this is what the 403b is. Now we have 3 of our staff that are enrolled in the plan, and that's awesome, right? And so I think just the continuation of modeling is one that's important, and to like the over communicating, because it will sink in and people will start to adopt the practice as well.
Yeah, I think there's such a stigma against taking benefits in nonprofit culture. There's always like, we all know the nonprofits, they're like, well, you should be lucky to work here. And I think being open about that, or even so for our retirement plan, after 90 days, you automatically get added. It automatically gets added and you get enrolled, and you can go in and say, no, I do not want to do this. But even like making the default participation, I find can really help people who feel like, oh wait, maybe I shouldn't be doing that. Maybe I should be helping saving the organization money or something. I will also agree with Keesha. Building the plane while flying it is basically our executive director Brienne's motto. And so I think that's the same for lots of small nonprofits, and none of us here are HR professionals. We all are wearing multiple hats. And so I think our journey has really pivoted and grown as our team has. We do lots of feedback from our team. But when I had seen this question, I was like, well, everything we do now, we once didn't do. Like everything we do now, we didn't do when I started 4 years ago. I'll name specifically. So this is the first year we're offering flex benefits for our team. They're reimbursement based, and they do have to opt in to take advantage, but then they can use it on like student loan payments or therapy or coaching, medical expenses. And we identified this as a priority for our organization in 2022 when our team told us like they would be interested in other benefits. It took us 2 years we identified that was a financial priority for the organization. And then we worked towards building that into our staffing costs, and we launched it in January of 2024. We have about 80% adoption of that reimbursement. But I think being honest with your team and saying like, thank you for your feedback. We are going to work towards this. It is not something we can do right now. But that's something as well that I think that, again, that transparency, but yeah, the building the plane while you fly it and being honest that you're doing that and saying, we're going to work on this. If you have feedback for us, let us know. We want to make this better. We want this to serve you.
I would also say Lilly has a lot of young educators, so folks that are just coming in. Don't assume that they know. Do not assume that they know how to opt into things. My co-ED, our head of finance and operations, like monitors that and then set up training sessions and opt-in sessions. So I think if it's making sure to like take that step back and be like, all right, have we given our staff the information so they can make an informed choice, and so they know what their options are, as some of my fellow panelists were saying. And apologies for the change in environment, but internet.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to add to that real quick, just when we talk about culture as well, Madeleine, you had said something that I was like, oh, this is great. Like this piece about dismantling, right? And I think to what you were saying, Maryam, like we have different generations of folks working in the workplace, and also different people who have had a myriad of experiences of workplace culture. And for many of us who are in the practice of equity, that is a top of mind conversation that I'm always thinking about, both in the output of the work that we do. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about like those professional development opportunities, but I don't want to forsake that just because we're an organization at the center of equity and justice, that like our team gets it every time, right? And has the capacity to understand all of those perspectives. And similarly, I also want to keep that in mind when it comes to the type of organization that I want us to continue to grow into and be. And so I think that part about the transparency is so important. But then there's also the reality that we're also having to frame a culture reshift and an unlearning of a workplace dominance that has been so part of our everyday experience. And that's real. And I love the comment that's in the chat, or the question in the chat about like, how do I as a leader even take that time? Because we're also unlearning and dismantling and disrupting in that way. And I'll just say, like, as a leader myself, I usually put more pressure on myself to undergird the experience of the staff that I support. And that's detrimental to the health of the organization. And so how do we find the balance to say, is this an organizational priority? And where's the space that we can also balance, like to give us the time that we need to heal, to recharge, because we won't be good for the organization if we're not modeling that, and our team will not be good for the organization if they're not both seeing that and then modeling it themselves.
Yeah, I wrote in here, but like leaders taking time off is even more important than your team taking off, because if you don't, they certainly won't. I actually took Monday off, and like wrote in our Slack channel, I need a mental health day. I had a really bad weekend. See you folks tomorrow. And I had multiple staff either message me or text me or come to me and say, thank you so much for taking time off on Monday. And like saying, oh, I'm not being sick, or like, oh, like for being honest, I am mentally, if I show up to work today, I'm not bringing my whole self. And how important that was. And like, I got teary reading messages about it. So yes, +1 to all of that.
Absolutely. From what I'm hearing, one, writing down so much that you all are sharing here, but really that one, checking in with staff, naming, what we feel like sometimes is obvious, but making sure that people know what they can take advantage of, and learning alongside, and encouraging those use of benefits, use of transparency, modeling it ourselves, and understanding our experience and taking time to understand staff experience, because ultimately we are all building this as we go. Each, our experience is informing how we're creating the cultures at our organizations as leaders, as staff members, and as supervisors of other folks. I want to go back a little bit. I know, a couple of folks have mentioned kind of the cost around staff well-being. I'd be curious to just hear, how have you made the case to maybe your board, funders, other people at your organization for really putting more time, money, resources into staff support?
I'll echo or re-say what Maryam said earlier, that so many of our roles are actually funded through grants. So we can't pay the big bucks, and we don't have a lot of room to negotiate with candidates. So we've made it an explicit practice that we make our best offer first and provide a wide range of benefits. And we've almost made that non-negotiable for the board. We have always come to them if we have something we want to add. We come to the board with a plan for expansion, and then have always directly tied a benefit goal to a financial goal. And so coming to them with a plan that's tied to that financial piece has been really important for us. I also think that in this day and age, if you have board and funders and EDs who do not understand that people are a resource, then maybe they shouldn't be on your board anymore. That especially for small nonprofits, people are why we have impact. And so if we're not caring for them, then why are we here?
I'll just add on. Yeah, I think having being fully transparent with your board, as well as transparent as you possibly can be. Like, we have our educators, they're fellows, they're new into their career, and as they were coming on board, we were like, we are going to pay them at this level because we are setting the standard by which they will be paid in the future. And so we did a salary analysis recently, and they are in the top range of salary analysis for like their positions. Is it worth it? Yes. Like, they are going to be the future of all like nonprofit organizations, whatever path they go into. And so I would, as an organization, much rather like set them up for success, set them up. And we're all women on our team as well. So like, I'm equally as like, oh no, I'm gonna make sure you start off on the most level footing. So where you can, like, raise the bar each time where you can, like, start at a place that as new people are coming in, reassess, be like, we're gonna start at this much higher level. Yes, is that like a little bit for like folks that you can't bring up, but that's why being transparent is just so important to everyone across the board.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think like we have a board who gets it, and there are still real factors that create barriers for like how we can move forward, right? And the one thing that I would just say of like why I think it's that the board gets it is, especially if we have diversity within our boards, like they are working for organizations that resemble the direction we may want to go and grow in, right? So they may work for organizations that do offer unlimited PTO or are able to match 401ks and 403bs, right? And so it's not that they don't understand that. It's again, just like the positioning and the championing. So I find that I am always the first one to hop on calls, especially when it's how do we engage the ecosystem to reframe and re-strategize and really think about the ways that we are helping people. Because as you said, Madeline, we all know that people are the impact, but yet there are still real barriers that are real in reports and real in proposals that we don't talk about it, even though we know it, right? And so I think some of that for me, because I'm not groomed necessarily in this field and I'm learning, I get to like push against the system a little bit more and ask questions later. Even in, you know, the preparation or the introduction to certain foundations or people, like I don't have a no harm like process of just like asking the question, like, how do you fund, you know, operational costs? Is that part of the experience that you do, right? And I think it's important for all of us to ask those questions and take maybe a little bit of that risk if we can. And I think to what Maryam was saying as well, like the risk is so important. Like if we, like, I think if we just try, we will see it may work or see it might not. Like we are implementing something that will come down the line a little bit later that I'm hoping will continue to attribute towards our well-being practice as an organization. And we don't know how the staff yet is going to respond to it, if they'll take that time. And that was one of the questions, like, will they actually take this time if we propose it? We don't know, but we're still going to try it. And I think that's, again, the part of like being able to tease and pilot some of these pieces and then see what the long-term impact can be as well.
We have never really had problems with our board investing in staff, and I think that's for a couple of reasons. I mean, one is I'm just a big believer in just asking people. I ask our students all the time, like, should we do this or should we do that? You know, and I get the best feedback from them ever. And I find the same thing with the staff. So when I come to the board with something, I have data behind it. I'm like, hey, this is, you know, I ask people, and I don't open a complaining session, but I do ask people to put like what's most important to you, right? And so, and then I'd be like, these are the top 3 things. And so this is what I want to do something about. So I think that's one. I think number 2, we're lucky and somewhat strategic that we have the right people on the board, and that's 2. And then number 3, this is just a reminder to EDs. Your board has 1 employee, the ED. That's it. So the ED is in charge of the staff. So basically, like, as myself being the chief executive, like what, you know, they're in charge of my compensation and my benefits, right? But I can decide that for everybody else. And as long as I'm using our resources like effectively and we're not going into bankruptcy or something like that, that's a battle that, you know, that some people might have to have at some point, being like, hey, you know, this is my prerogative. You get to set my compensation and my parameters, and this is what I'm doing for the team. I hope no one has to do that, but it is actually, it's the rules.
Absolutely. Thank you all for sharing that. You know, before we kind of transition and talk a little bit more about staff growth, because I know we wanted to certainly talk about that in this panel, you know, knowing that staff support is a process, and any process, as we've all kind of shared and you've all shared, you know, comes with learning. I'd be interested in hearing, you know, what, if anything, has been challenging about expanding staff support.
I think one of the things that has been challenging for us is the barrier of not being able to do it. So like people come and ask for very baseline realistic things, like in before we had a retirement plan. And so I start doing research into it and realizing like, oh, we can't match right now. Like as an organization, I cannot promise that. I can't implement that. And I find that very challenging because I'm going to make it happen. And I think I also feel, especially when that comes from a team member that I respect and want to keep, I feel that panic of like, oh my goodness, if I can't give them this, are they going to go? And I think I've really had to learn as a leader that as the leader, I am beholden to the mission of the organization. And if the mission is not going to happen because we start to Nicole's point, like going crazy and giving everybody, misusing funds to make sure people are happy, then our mission isn't happening. So I find that balance between what is realistic for us right now, what is a growth point. I find that knife edge really challenging.
I always say to the staff that I do what's honest first. I do what's best for our students second, and then I do what's best for the team, and in that order. So I make it very, very clear, like that's what the priority is, right? And there are times when those three values conflict with one another. And when there's an inflection point like that, we talk about it, right? And there are going to be some times that what's best for the staff is not what's best for the students. And it's hard to say no to people, right? So I think that's part of it. And then part of it is just my own growth as a leader. I mean, it is taking me a very long time to realize that I cannot make everyone happy. I am not ice cream. Okay. There is just like no way I can do this. And I think that there are some things that I know that we're never going to be able to do, and just, explain why. Like, I think that sometimes explaining why just really helps. And then there's some things that we can't do now, but we'd be able to do in a few years. And I'm a big believer, if somebody has feedback and they want, of bringing them into the process, being like, okay, if you want to make this happen, come be part of the solution, right? And I think that is very helpful because it helps people realize sometimes how much it takes to be able to do that. But also they feel included in the process and like they're actually being heard and brought in as well.
Absolutely. Thank you all for sharing so candidly about those challenges that are very real and something that, many organizations are facing and that we've faced kind of as we move forward in that staff support process. And now I'm going to move on to some questions on staff growth, because knowing that staff support isn't just time off, as you all have modeled and shared. Would love to hear, how do you encourage staff professional growth at your organization? I know a couple of folks mentioned having those professional development budgets, but what has that looked like in terms of encouragement to either use or in other ways grow professionally?
I'll just provide a tangible touch point right now that's happening in real time. We are celebrating 35 years as an organization at Teaching for Change. And that's a big undertaking. And with the majority of our staff now new within the last 3 years, a big piece of what we've been focusing on is our communication strategy. And while it's not their necessarily choice, we chose to invest in communications training and other resources to support the overall direction of this campaign and the celebration of our 35 years. And so that was something that we allowed all of our team to be a part of in different ways. And even some of the Spur Local team got to participate as well. And so just thinking about those creative moments and opportunities. One other piece I'll just raise as like a professional and can help sometimes to fit the gap of capacity is if you have access to the capacity building platforms like Catchafire, for example, how are we using that to support staff and provide the space for the AI without AI, right? And I mean, that's the reality of like how they can help. And so I think even just having, like, I have staff who just are highly collaborative and brainstorm. And so Catch a Fire serves them well to be able to have a project-based, time-bound, and other partner to really just bounce ideas off of as they work towards the project goal. And so we do check-ins with the team during our all staff meetings as well. Again, just like, what are projects that would help you achieve the goals that you're working towards for the organization? And sometimes it's imperfect and sometimes they don't take advantage of it, and that's fine. But again, the repetition and then reminding them that we do have that as a benefit is also a space of support.
Yeah, we do a couple of things. We've made a shift, or we made a shift about a year ago, and we started adding in professional development and like learning and development funds into our grants, and started considering it a fringe benefit. So that was one of those financial goals that we could kind of tie to staff support. So we could ensure that staff had the adequate budget to choose what they would like. And we have a Slack channel specifically for professional development opportunities that I'm like constantly sharing things into, and even tagging folks if I think like this might be interesting for you. And then I think one of the ways, particularly for younger staff, that we really encourage is providing a list of like industry associations or organizations that provide those things. I think as someone who like, I'm a lifelong learner, I'm a sponge. And so I'm always like, what other organizations doing cool things? Whose newsletter do I need to subscribe to? That's not always the way people receive information, but it is the way those organizations send out information. So reminding our team, like, make sure you're signed up for these, the International Downtown Association, like make sure you're signed up for their newsletter. And we're a member. Please take advantage of this free resources that we are providing to you. And then I think one of the other things that has encouraged staff professional development, and is something we're actually in the process of even kind of firming up right now, is our competency matrix. So helping our team identify areas of growth. And we are actually changing our competency matrix so that it's not just like, here's an area of growth, but here are 6 to 7 tangible ways that we would suggest or encourage you to seek out that information. We see you're having trouble with time management. Here are some resources for you. And so that it's not just like lip service, but that we actually want to support people to find the skills that they need personally, as a member of our team, but also for their individual growth.
Can I just hop in? Another piece that Madeleine, you just shared, and I remembered something Nicole said, is that even just like knowing who your staff is and what they're interested in. So like I've had, to your point, Madeleine, staff who are interested in like data and Excel, like learning and accounting and all that. And I'm like, cool. So when I see those offerings come up, I'm like, oh, I remember when you said X. And so sending them that information. And again, even if they're not part of it, or even if they're not signed up themselves, letting them know that those spaces are offered. And I can't stress enough that we have access to so many different organizations and networks and capacity building pieces. And I know it takes time, and we might be the ones getting the emails, but being able to connect our staff with those resources also widens the network support that's there. And one other piece I'll just say is like finding the space. Like I know what I've appreciated about being part of Spur Local is the cohort connection. And so our staff will thrive off of the cohort connection as well, right? So who are the other program managers that may be in this ecosystem that we haven't done like a meet and greet or some sort of connection point that at least then helps them spread the wealth. And again, I think strengthens the ecosystem that we're all serving here in DC as well.
And I just want to add in one other thing, maybe a little bit unconventional that I've done. I mean, because like full, transparency is big for me. And so I know, like I talk to my staff about like, I know some of you aren't going to be here forever, and that's okay. Let's look at job descriptions of things that you might be interested in your next step. So we go through and we look at it, and it's like, all right, here's where you're currently at, right? And matching up to this, like, and you don't have to have like all of this, but here's an area of growth for you. Like, how could you tag into something? How could you support something? So that way you're building that skill set, so you're ready for that next thing. And because it's about confidence, it's not necessarily about knowing how to do the thing, it's about feeling confident that you could do the thing. And so that's what I want for our fellows, is just to feel confident that they could do the thing by having been exposed to that thing.
Yeah, we actually do a lot of that, a lot of the same conversations. I haven't actually looked at like other job descriptions with employees, but maybe I will now. So, but definitely I've been like, what's your dream job, 10 or 15 years from now? And then we work backwards. And we do this formally in a few ways. I know one of you mentioned setting, having specific goals to meet every year. We have staff set 3 to 5 goals every year, and one of them has to be a professional development goal. So that hardwires in personal growth as part of the work that they have to accomplish, just as much as, making sure that their students are getting, IT credentials. It's basically they're held accountable with that one in a similar way. And we use the same sort of approach where we're like, okay, what do you want to do 10 years from now? What kind of professional development is going to help you get there? And then what are you looking for? And that's why we have that kind of wide berth. And then we give them the money to be able to actually do it, as well as the more informal things of like, the free webinars that we may be able to get into, or the kind of the smaller things that they may be able to participate in a little bit more reasonably.
Yeah, I
And then
would also
another
add,
thing that I think, let me just finish this one, sorry, is
oh,
that,
no, go
that we
for
do
it.
that is really important is like, I'm a really big believer in prioritization. And I think that when you're looking at burnout, there's a lot of times that I think people get this deer in the headlights kind of look. And if you have someone who's like just one step removed a little bit, sometimes I can sit down and be like, do you really need to do that next week? Can you do this? And that would allow you then the time to do the professional development or to take your time off. And oftentimes I found that often can help open up people's schedules a little bit. Unless the crunch times, which we're just kind of open about that. Sorry, Madeline, please go on.
Well, no, I was going to say, I think oftentimes because we are small nonprofits, we talk about usually professional growth means that growth is outside the organization. But one of the things we've started encouraging our team to do, and when we're having those conversations with our team about what they want next, is to identify what we could be doing better as an organization, and if they want to do it. So my favorite example is that we hired our first director of storytelling and marketing in October. And we did that because the staff person was in another role and came to us and said, hey, I am seeing a huge need for us to be telling our story better as an organization. And I'm seeing all these opportunities that we have missed. And I want to do that. Like, I have my skill set is in storytelling and applied theater, and I want to do that. And so can I do that? What would that look like for me to be? And that was in like March of last year. And so we started having conversations about like, well, what would that look like? And the speed with which they were able to get up and running, because her onboarding time was like on Monday, Anna Claire starts as the director of storytelling and marketing. It's honestly been incredible, and I think has created a lot of excitement in the organization that you're not pigeonholed into the role you are now. If you see something and have the capacity and are willing to work with us to find the funding for it, to identify that, we want to make that happen, especially if it's, it's serving the organization's mission. And she's doing a lightning talk tomorrow on pivoting for marketing. So shout out to her.
Thank you. One final question. I know there's so much more we could talk about and so many ways we could take this. But kind of as a final question, final advice you want to give to folks. We talked a lot about burnout earlier today. We talked a lot about, what is realistic. So kind of a two-part question here. What advice do you have for where to start if you're an ED with a burned out staff that wants to prioritize staff well-being? Or kind of the second part, or what advice do you have for staff members that are burned out in terms of managing up to be able to get that support they need?
My advice for EDs is if you hear people are burned out, talk to them one-on-one. Just sit down and be like, hey, how are you doing? And then find out, do some interviews. And then at the end of the interviews, you probably will see some themes. And then I always find that oftentimes when you have a set of data, the answer sort of emerges, right? I found that to be true. And then for employees, I think that if you're feeling burnt out, I guess try to figure out what's going on here, right? There could be a lot of things. Is there something outside of work? Do you need more? Is it more rest? Is there a task or something? And then come to your supervisor, propose a solution. Be like, hey, this is what's going on right now. Would it be possible to do this? And I think that, the worst thing that can happen is someone will say no, but as someone who is a boss, I always I sometimes have a hard time sometimes when people are just like, I'm just unhappy. But if somebody comes and proposes an actual solution and has thought through about what could make a difference and how it might actually be workable, I'm usually pretty jazzed to hear about it.
Yeah, I think I would echo that what Nicole just said. I don't think it's currently an ED. It's not that I never want to say no, right? I just sometimes am not aware or as aware because I'm over here, over there. And so I appreciate when my staff comes to me and is like, here's the situation, here's a solution I want to try. And I'm like, you have done all the work for me? By all means. Yes, let us try this solution. All right. And now I've been made aware of other things that are going on. And I think one of the benefits of having this co-ED model that Erin and I have, but also being still in the field. And this is something I would probably say to EDs. I'm still very much a member of the team, doing work alongside my team, having deadlines. I tell my head of development, you're my boss. You need to tell me what to do when it comes to donors or this or that. I'm your employee right now. And so I think for an ED, don't get too far removed from the day-to-day work. Stay. I go to the programming, I do the curriculum, I do the scheduling. I'm not saying doing it all the time, but because now I know the touch points. I know the places where it's difficult for staff members. And then I'm able to be like, all right, y'all, that was a challenge. I don't want to deal with that again. And I know you don't want to deal with that. So let's find a solution. And I think the last thing I would say is transparency. Again, to me, it always comes back. Today, I met with my team and I'm like, y'all, I'm burnt out. I'm tired. I am juggling the strategic plan, curriculum. I just came back from spring break with the kids. So that was a trip, not a vacation. And so I am tired. And I was like, I can give you, can we do 45 minutes? Can we do this? Because that's all I have. I say no. No is a complete sentence. And so all of those things, I think, is just not trying to soldier through, not trying to keep pushing all the time, because you can't show up your best self. You can't expect other people to show up and be their best selves if everyone is drained, and if you're not also modeling the things that you or expecting other people. I also, though, sometimes do say, do as I say, not as I do, and make sure other people are doing, like, taking off and things even when I'm not. So.
Yeah, I know we're like right at time. But I would also just add, listening is so important. And knowing how you listen best as a leader, for EDs. For example, I get very frustrated with in-person feedback sessions because I feel like certain individuals can like dominate a conversation and the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And I can feel myself get defensive when people start to mention something that we already have. And I'm like, we already have that. We already do that. Like, and I can feel myself not listening. I can feel myself moving into that posture. And so for us, we do a lot of feedback, anonymous feedback surveys for our team, because then I find that people are more honest. They focus on solutions. And then I have the time and space to go, they are saying this because they don't know about a resource, and I need to do a better job of communicating that to my team. So knowing yourself and knowing how to listen. And then I also just wanted to say verbally, what Keesha put in the chat, that I have a really hard time remembering that I'm a position of power. And that means that my self-improvement, my vulnerability, my culture building has an impact on people. And that is for staff as well as EDs. But knowing, like establishing your baseline is one of the first things that both staff and EDs can do. What does your onboarding process look like? Do people have the information they need to succeed? What's your performance management system like? Like all of those, establishing the baseline, again, is sometimes one of the easiest things to do, but also the hardest things to do. But as an ED or a person, another team member in power, like we get to create it. It's our job to create it. So empowering people to do that, empowering yourself to do that too.
Well, thanks all. This has been incredible. And Keesha, thanks for sharing in the chat here. We are so appreciative of all the four of you and the knowledge that you're bringing, the wisdom, the experience, the transparency. And I've really appreciated it. I know there's so much going on in the chat as well around this. So thank you all for being here. We've really, really appreciated this. This concludes our day one here for our National Small Nonprofit Summit. I will say to everyone here, if you are joining us tomorrow, we hope you will be. If you are joining us in person, we will be at the MLK Library in downtown DC starting at 10 a.m. Just recommend getting there a little bit early in case you need to figure out parking, though we recommend Metro. It's the easiest way to get there and right outside the library. So we have that. And we'll get kicked off right at 10 o'clock. We're going to meet on the 4th floor. So when you come in, you'll head up to the 4th floor, and that's where we'll be having our day 2 in person. If you're participating virtually, you will receive a packet in the morning tomorrow with the sessions recorded and different worksheets and guides to guide you through asynchronously as you're able to throughout the day. But we've really appreciated all of you being here, engaging with us, the wisdom you've shared with each other and peer-to-peer, and we're excited to continue tomorrow. So thanks all for being here, and we'll see you in the morning. Thanks.